What's up, War Report family? We are back with another great edition of the Auburn Express podcast, powered by the War Report. You know the deal. It's Tuesday, but we're recording this on a Monday. And as always, we're doing our weekly Power Rankings segment brought to you by SEC Unfiltered. My guy, Chris Phillips, is here. Chris, you were busy on Saturday again. Tell us about where you went this week.
Yeah, Mike, first things first, appreciate you having me on, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Yeah, I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Boy,
Mike,
were you.
The run that we are on right now is
You're picking your games wisely.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's sometimes, what is the slogan? It's how do you realize you're in the good old days while you're still in them? I realize the run that we're on right now. I've had 4 games this season that have come down to the final play, including 3 in a row.
That's
and that
insane.
game in Death Valley, I said this, Mike, and I mean it. It was a spiritual experience in that stadium.
Oh,
I mean, it was the emotions, the intensity, the everything. Man, for those that have been there, they understand. It's just nothing like a Saturday night down in Louisiana, man.
I'm not gonna lie.
Unreal.
I saw a video of like the whole crowd like reciting Lil Boozy lyrics.
Yes, I was right there with them.
Oh
I was right.
God.
Set It Off is still ringing in my ears, Mike.
They set it off? Look, you know what else got set off were these power rankings, because madness for 2 weeks straight in the SEC. It is absolute mayhem. Let's get right into it. Last week, Chris, you had Texas at number 1, Georgia at 2, Bama at 3, LSU at 4. I protested Bama at 3, so we're going to deal with that. Ole Miss at 5, frauds. Texas A&M at 6, Kentucky at 7. Kentucky at 8, Tennessee at 7. The Hogs had a bye week this week, so we'll see where you had them. And then the rest of this, right? Like Missouri, obviously a very good team, but you were low on them, right? And dropped them down. Let's see what they did for you. They got Auburn coming up here this week. Florida way down there at 13, and then the back half, obviously, just the bums of the conference: South Carolina, Auburn, and of course the worst, Mississippi State. Jumping forward, boom, we've got some movement, but not by Auburn and Mississippi State. Still at the bottom, folks. Florida remains the same, but let's jump to the top here. Big time movement. You dropped Ole Miss from 5 to 10. I'm a little shocked at that.
Frauds, like you said. Yeah,
I'm a little shocked at that much of a drop.
Yeah, I mean, I just watching Ole Miss in person, man, they're just a shell of what I thought they would be.
Oh, wow.
Offensively, just offensively, man, with the personnel they have, it's crazy to me. They're not putting up 38 plus a game. Again, you go into an environment like that. I picked LSU to win the football game, but
right.
It goes back to what I saw against Kentucky, and I don't take a lot from what they did at South Carolina in that game. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, again, you try not to punish too harshly in this 2024 season for losing games, because everybody's losing games. But when you compile again or compact what they did against Kentucky and then that LSU game, some of the inefficiencies they had, especially on offense, I just offensive line still a concern. I don't know, man. I just Ole Miss is not what I thought they'd be this year.
You know what's interesting was I also picked LSU, and at the end of the game, it was most people were like, I think Ole Miss's defense is legit, and at the end of the game, their defense gave up all the plays LSU needed to win the game. My friend Courtney called that the Pete Golding special. Looks good, but didn't deliver at the end. Let's jump back in here. Texas A&M at 5. Vanderbilt rockets up from where you had them.
Some respect in the doors, man.
Yeah, to 7. Kind of hard to jump them higher than this, but they, I think, firmly in the top half of the conference is absolutely fair. They're winning. They're winning games. They could have absolutely had an emotional letdown versus Kentucky after beating Bama the week before, but they didn't, and they won fairly soundly. They controlled that game. So interesting there. Tennessee had Florida, and they snuck out with the win. I thought Billy Napier was going to pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I told you, Mike, off the air. If they had a good head coach, they probably win the football game. They had that 4th and inches that they run a jet sweep on that just some baffling decision making. And here's the thing. I'm going to say this too, because we should just address the elephant in the room that Alabama's at 4, and these power rankings are chaos. If you haven't been watching college football the last couple weeks, the whole thing's chaos. All right.
It is chaos.
Everybody's got their problems and their issues. Texas is the only one kind of sitting there that, they've been unblemished. They've looked great doing it. They'll have the test against Georgia this weekend.
Yeah.
Everybody else has holes. Everybody else has deficiencies, Mike. I would say this with Bama at 4, because, again, we're on an Auburn show. A lot of people want to go there. I'm probably still giving Bama a little too much credit.
With credit, yeah, I agree.
It's when you look at the rest of the field, it's like, do you slide A&M in the 4 spot?
But they won. They won, so I get it.
They did win. But to your point, they are doing things right now. And I think what's so baffling with Bama, again, I was at that game against Georgia. I watched them play one of the best first halves, especially, Mike, one of the best quarters I've ever seen a college football team play, the way they dismantled Georgia. I don't know what happened in that locker room at halftime, but they look completely different. Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack are getting circles run around them right now. I mean, and not against, put respect on Vandy, but not against elite competition. Like, they're going to face much more difficult competition. They have to go to Neyland Stadium this weekend. Tennessee, again, they got problems too. Nico Iamaleava hasn't thrown a touchdown in multiple weeks. They're great with a run game. Their front seven is amazing, but their quarterback play has been subpar. Their wide receivers aren't making tough catches. So something's got to give in that football game, right? The battle of Jalen Milroe and Nico. So, I mean, again, Bama being at 4, it's like, who wants the top spot? I don't know if everybody's good or everybody's terrible, or if it's somewhere in between, but the parity in the SEC, man, it's just unlike we were seeing before. So,
yeah, I want to note South Carolina went into Tuscaloosa and did that.
Went into Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
yes.
Yes. I asked on Twitter, I was like, is Tuscaloosa just not a tough place to play anymore? Or
it may not be at 11 a.m. I mean, listen, I got the best of the best experience, but it may not be at 11 a.m.
Yeah, just to me, absolutely interesting what's going on in Tuscaloosa right now with Kalen DeBoer. But I want to take a look at this. You mentioned 1 and 2 play each other this week. So we'll see Texas face off versus Georgia. I would like to note, while Texas has looked like the most complete team, they also have one of the easiest schedules I've ever seen in the SEC. Like that first draw for them, incredible. First year in the SEC, they got what Georgia usually gets, honestly, in terms of a schedule. LSU, obviously, with the big win in Death Valley over Ole Miss.
Look, but even, Mike, them in that 3 spot, like, I'm getting pushed back on that because
I don't know.
Mike, I watched them in person.
Okay.
They are the best, bad, chaotic, good, entertaining, funny. Like, they're everything. They're everything packaged in one, right? I mean, they played sloppy in that game. I saw Garrett Nussmeier make just some absurd decisions on some of the throws. But then, like you mentioned, Mike, when he had to, marbles, kahunas was what Garrett Nussmeier had. Ice in his veins, goes down the field, throws the big touchdown to get it to OT, and then hits Kyron Lacey. I mean, I see the potential in LSU, but even them, they're such a roller coaster. So it's a battle of attrition in the SEC this year, man. Again, the portal, I think, is just brought on. The talent is dispersed more evenly at most of these schools, and I just think we're seeing the effects of that.
Yeah. Again, in front of Bama, I don't have a problem with this. Look, that was a tough win versus, a team in Ole Miss that was widely believed to be a playoff contender. I think that's going to be in question now if you look at the back half of their schedule. Can a 3-loss Ole Miss team win, make it into the 12-team playoff? I'm not sure that.
I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no, Mike. Not with that schedule.
Yeah, it's the front half of the schedule was supposed to be 6-0, right? Like, let's call that what it was. Everybody saw them starting 6-0. That didn't happen. So, you're left with what we see here. Texas A&M, obviously, they had a big win over Mizzou last week. And, you got Mizzou down here. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how this all pans out. But this is absolute chaos with Vanderbilt in the middle of
Mike, should we talk about how close you were to flipping Mississippi State and Auburn?
Yeah.
I mean, State gave Georgia Jeff Levy.
They put 31 points on Georgia. I don't know. 31.
Listen, I don't know if, I'm not trying to make any sort of points, but I don't know how many people would have called me crazy if I would have said right now, Mississippi State. I don't know if they'd beat Auburn, but they give them all they want. That's for sure. I mean, with the way it seems like they're kind of starting to trend and heat up, but I don't want to overreact to it. It's a loss, but still, the way it happened was what was shocking to me.
Yeah, look, both teams have some things. Auburn definitely has some things to clean up, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But they're not the only ones with some things to clean up. You and I can get Manscaped. Visit manscaped.com and get cleaned up. Guys, Manscaped wants you to be a sophisticated man in today's world. You can't be, you got a very nice beard there, Chris. Can't use the same beard for your face that you do for your balls. Manscaped has you covered with their beard and balls bundle. I always struggle with this read. The Beard Hedger and also the Lawnmower 5.0, one for the balls, one for the face. Manscaped.com. Use code Rapport to get 20% off plus free shipping at Manscaped.com. That's code Rapport for 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Chris, let's get back to it here. Auburn takes on Mizzou in Columbia. And this is a big game for both teams, I think, in a lot of ways. If you're Mizzou, people have started to lose faith in you a little bit. They still have one of the best QB wide receiver combinations in the country, and Brady Cook and Luther Burden. Auburn brings in a defense that has allowed plus 400 yards only one time this season. It is a wonder that these guys are 2-4. All right. This is, I mean,
and the offense, if you take away the turnovers, they have one of the best offenses in the country. So.
It's good. It's insane. Like the stats do not match the outcomes for Auburn. They have, by all intents and purposes, statistically moved their team forward from last year. Peyton Thorne threw for only 1,700 yards last year. He's on pace to clear that by a mile. Jarquez Hunter is on pace for a 1,000-yard season. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Chris, is on pace to be Auburn's first 1,000-yard receiver since 1999. They just cannot score. What do you see Saturday in Columbia for the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, Mike, how long before Hugh Freeze starts? He's probably going to hear those comments from you, start touting them as the best 2-4 team in the country. That sounds about right. By the way, to add to, I know we just got past it, but proud user of Manscaped, so highly suggest use that code Rapport. I can vouch. Anyway, so yeah, this game. I've gone back and forth on this one, Mike. We went ahead and previewed this one over at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to check that out, myself and Cole Thompson. This is one, to your point. I mean, Auburn, it goes without saying, desperately needs it. Mizzou is trying to, they got the fraud label put on them a couple weeks ago. They're trying to obviously prove that they're still a team, a force to be dealt with in the SEC and the college football playoff hunt. And, they got a big boost. Luther Burden's going to play in the football game. He went down, I believe it was in the third quarter, maybe earlier in the game, but went down in that game against UMass. Shoulder injury reported on Monday by Pete Thamel. He's going to play. Nate Noel, the status. What is his status in the running back room? They still have Marcus Carroll, but what is his status? To your point, Mike, like at some point, I feel like Auburn is going to break out and win a game like this because, they're a good team that just finds ways to undo all of the good they do on every Saturday. They're not nearly as bad as their record. I am not trying to be like coach speak or pump up a 2-4 team, but as we know, you're not always exactly what your record says you are. And you look at some of the numbers and they're really impressive. Mike, I have to go with Mizzou in this spot in a tight game until I can see Auburn clutch up late and win a football game. Now, maybe Missouri loses the game. I don't know. But I look at Mizzou, and they've got problems on their offensive line, right? I mean, forget the UMass game, whatever. They bounced back and got right, but it was UMass in a 15,000-seat stadium. They've got problems in the line of scrimmage. I think Auburn can obviously expose those. What does Brady Cook do under pressure? He has not been what they expected this year. We know about the weapons they have, and that's what's been so befuddling about is the offense just has not clicked. What does Peyton Thorne give you? I mean, I think Missouri defensively, Corey Bethune can give them some issues. But again, Auburn's got weapons. They've been able to move the football, especially between the 20s. But until I see Auburn might clutch up late in a big game and go win a football game and not do things to shoot themselves in the foot, make costly errors, and it's on the road. I know Como's not exactly it's not one of the most ferocious venues in the conference, but still going on the road to Mizzou. They've got just as much to play for, if not even more than Auburn does right now. I gotta see the Auburn Tigers clutch up late and go win a game before I can actually pick them to do it.
Yeah, look, Missouri's 5-1.
Yeah,
which is why
they're not a bad football team. They're not a bad football team.
Yeah, you're 5-1 and you got them at 11 in the conference. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to see what comes out of this one. This is kind of a do or die for both teams, but in different ways. So hear me out on this one. Auburn is now the goal is just figure out a way to make a bowl game. If you lose to Mizzou, you essentially have to you've got to win 4 out of your last 5, which include Texas A&M at home and Alabama on the road. So you're going to have to beat a good football team if you're going
couple good football teams.
Yeah. If you're going to get to a bowl game this year. If you're Missouri, you're trying to keep playoff hopes alive. Our friend Heather Dinich, friend of the War Report, said that she thinks that the SEC gets 5 teams into this playoff. But the more this thing unfolds, it's really hard to see 5. Right? I can see a solid 3, and I can see who the potential 4th may be. But that 5th spot, I think, is going to be really difficult, especially if Missouri loses to Auburn at home on Saturday. So I think it's important for them in that way. If you're Missouri, your aspirations have grown beyond. You have national aspirations now, right? It's not just we want to win the division. There are no more divisions, but before there were. It's not just we want to win the SEC. We want to be in contention for a national championship, and a 12-team playoff has given you that opportunity.
And the door is wide open. With all the chaos, the door is wide open.
With last year, Missouri would have hands down made a 12-team playoff. Them and Ole Miss absolutely would have been in. And now you're trying to duplicate that performance from last year. You got to get out of this thing. It's just going to be really difficult, I think, for the committee to see Missouri as a serious contender. If you lose at home to an Auburn team that is legit, you mentioned this earlier about not able to clutch up late and is finding ways to lose games. I'm with you. I picked Missouri before the season on this one. Nothing has happened to change my mind. I think Auburn has the ability to win, but I have not seen any evidence that they know how to win because, their first 5 games were at home, right? You left that stretch 2-3, unable to clutch up at home. If this game is close and if Auburn wins, make no mistake, it's probably going to be a close game if Auburn wins. If Missouri wins, it could be anywhere from a close game to a blowout.
And Mike, good teams find ways to win games. Bad teams find ways to lose them. At some point you can continue until you're blue in the face talking about coulda, woulda, shoulda. But when you have to wonder too where Auburn is at mentally. It's really hard to continue to try to pick yourself up off the mat. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'll be curious to see, Mike, if you had 0 turnovers in that game at Georgia. If you can do that again, if Auburn doesn't shoot themselves in the foot, I very well could see them win. I won't be surprised if they win this football game. I haven't sold all my stock on Mizzou, but again, they've got issues of their own too. And I think Auburn offensively, could have a performance that is able to push them over the edge. But again, man, in a game that I just expect to be close, I picked this as a 1-score game. I think my final was 34-27 in this game. Is Auburn going to make the plays necessary late to win it on the road in the SEC, where it is much, much tougher, to your point, to win games like this?
I like Drink, and I like what he's doing there. Before the season, again, I was high on Mizzou. I was high on Mizzou last year. Nobody believed me, and then look what they did. 2 losses, 10-2 season. I'm not so sure. I'm not as high on them this year as I was last year, but by all intents and purposes, they are a more complete football team than Auburn is right now because Auburn is so far off offensively. And, as good as I feel like the defense has a chance to perform in this game, when you cannot move the ball, there's a causality that affects them. If you lose time of possession, again, there's a causality that affects them. Alabama, when they lost to Vanderbilt, you know how good that offense is? They scored 35 points and they only had the ball for 17 minutes. And they lost 35-40. In most cases, if a team had the ball for that long, no way you're scoring more than 2 touchdowns. Right? Yeah. So it's interesting for me with Auburn. Again, can they keep their defense off the field, extend the drives, and then score in the red zone? Now, given all that, ESPN's matchup predictor, Chris, has this one about 68-32 in Missouri's favor, which I think is fair. What do you see the final score of this one before we get out of here?
Yeah, I've got 34-27, Mike. I think it's a down-to-the-wire game. I think it's another close game. I could see Auburn leading in the second half at some point in this game. But again, I think Missouri at home with the veteran quarterback and Brady Cook, I think they will find a way. And I won't be surprised, too, if late in this ball game, Corey Batoon and that defense do enough to confuse Peyton Thorne and force a costly interception or two, and that turned out being the difference. Again, we've already seen that to this point. Even when Thorne has played well, he's been prone to make that big mistake. So again,
so.
I think this is another game that could be for the taking for Auburn, and I think they're going to have an opportunity to again clutch up late in the game and win it. But I think Mizzou will outlast the Tigers in Como and get a much needed win. Because again, you talk about again their playoff hopes and what the expectations of this season were and are. Missouri needs it too. They're trying to prove again to the college ball world that we're not the frauds everybody said we were after that game in College Station. So they got a chip on their shoulder as well. Getting Luther Burden back is a huge boost. We'll see if Nate Noel can go. But I think either way, I think they'll do enough to win 34-27.
34-27. I'll tell you what, that's a lot of points for this year's Auburn Tigers. So if they get 27 points at this rate, likely it means the defense turned in some points. It's going to be tough, I think. Well, Chris, I want to thank you for joining us before we get out of here. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, Mike, it's always a pleasure, man. I appreciate the opportunity. We're at SEC Unfiltered, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content. Also YouTube, podcasts, and our website, secunfiltered.com.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express podcast powered by the War Report. If you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. I'm signing off, and as always, War Eagle.